Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Word Balloon. Welcome to 2020. This is John Suntress. 2020 is Word Balloon's 15th year. Come May 10th, it will be Word Balloon's 15th anniversary officially. And I will be representing a bunch of great episodes from the Word Balloon archives leading up to May 10th. So I hope you'll enjoy those. Thanks a lot for listening today. Questions or comments about the show, reach me via email, john@wordballoon.com. You can follow me on Twitter under John Wordballoon, @JohnWordballoon, or under Facebook under my name, John Suntress, and, of course, the Word Balloon Network. So, great month. Really looking forward to what's going to happen this month in January. I thank you for being along on the ride. You might hear one more commercial before the show starts. Please listen to the commercials. Don't fast forward them. That's how I get paid. And I thank you for your support and your attention. One more spot, and then the show will begin. Thanks a lot for listening. Welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here, sharing a great conversation with Marvel writer Jim Zub. Now, Jim was part of the Avengers Weekly books, along with Al Ewing and Mark Waid. And we talk a bit about those projects, but primarily, we're here to talk about a couple things. First of all, Jim is the new writer on Conan. And that starts with issue 13. He's taken over for Jason Aaron. But Jim is no stranger to the Robert Howard or the Conan universe. He's also been writing Serpent War, which has been coming out, and a great book. A great crossover of various times and Robert Howard characters, along with Moon Knight. Pretty interesting team-up. And he goes into detail about that. Jim has also been writing a lot of Dungeons & Dragons comics for IDW. We really get into gaming and where gaming is now. I had no idea. So it's a great education for me. And if you're a Dungeons & Dragons fan, I'm sure you'll agree with a lot of Jim's points of view. But as always, a great conversation with Jim. I like the way he thinks as a writer, as a creator, and as a nerd. I'm always happy to have new conversations with him. And I've been meaning to release this for the week since we recorded it last Monday, but putting it out now. Jim Zub on today's Word Balloon. Brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners who support me via Patreon. Thank you greatly, League, for your support. 2020 is going to be a big year for the League and for Word Balloon, and I thank you very much for standing by me and subscribing to Word Balloon via Patreon. Patreon.com/WordBalloon. That's my direct Patreon page. You can also click on the Patreon ad on the front page of WordBalloon.com. We have new members, and I thank you greatly for your support, League of Word Balloon listeners. Word Balloon also brought to you by Aftershock Comics. Aftershock starting things strong in 2020 with some brand new titles, and we'll be talking to some of these creators about these books. People like John Layman, one of my favorite people in comics. He's got a brand new book called The Man Who Effed Up Time. Pretty cool, man. Also, Zach Thompson has Undone by Blood. There's God Killers by Mark Zabel, and those will go along into the Aftershock pantheon with great books like Baby Teeth with Donny Cates and Gary Brown, and Animosity from Marguerite Bennett and Raphael de la Tour, A Walk Through Hell from Garth Ennis and Gordon Suzuka. There's Dark Red from T. Seeley, Dark Arc from Cullen Bunn. So many other great Aftershock books worthy of your attention. Don't take my word for it. Go to their website. You'll find full story descriptions, art preview pages, and the diamond codes on how to order Aftershock books through your local shop at AftershockComics.com. All right, let's do it now. A good new conversation with Jim Zub on today's Word Balloon. Jim Zub, welcome back to Word Balloon. Good to talk to you, man.
I am thrilled to be back.
I'm sorry it's been so long, as I was telling you off the air,
it's good. Yeah, but I think that's the nature of the thing. Everyone gets busy, and all of a sudden you turn around and you go, it couldn't possibly have been more than 2 years. That's insane, right? But
it happens all the time. It happens all the time, yeah. So, and it does.
But it's fun. It means we got stuff to catch up on.
Absolutely, but it does. It feels like, I just saw him a couple months ago at New York, but that was like a year and a half ago. So, you know.
Time is flying. It is 2020. We're in the full future now.
Well, and you've got a big 2020 ahead of you that starts in February. You're taking over Conan from Jason Aaron with issue 13.
Yeah, when people say that out loud, even myself, it sounds very surreal. It's an absolute dream project for me.
That's great.
Yeah, I grew up on sword and sorcery stuff, Conan the Barbarian in particular, and Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm working on both properties right now simultaneously and trying to make sure that they feel very different from each other, but are also, exemplify the kind of qualities of things I love about sword and sorcery, across the board.
That's excellent. So what can you tell us about the upcoming arc, your first arc doing Conan?
Well, so we've kind of got some really cool long-term plans for the series. There are whole areas of the Hyborian Age. I mean, most of the adventures that Roy Thomas has done, Howard himself, kind of sticks to in the traditional kind of map. I guess you'd call it the West, the Northwest, or the Southwest. Some central stuff, but most of the East in particular is ill-defined in kind of the Hyborian Age canon. And I want to put Conan in some places that we haven't seen him very often. Yeah. And it also gives me the ability to do a bit of building out of some of the mythos in that area, creating some new threats and surprises. Because Conan, at different parts of his life is so iconic in terms of his behavior and stuff. So what you need to do is really change up the situation, put him into the unknown, and then see how he reacts to it. And that's what's really exciting for me. So
very cool. What era of Conan, like what age or whatever, what kind of period of Conan are you dealing with?
So this is a little earlier. Jason's run kind of runs a bit of the gamut. So he has some young and sort of, in his prime, and then the King Conan area.
Conan, sure.
Yeah. For me, I'm starting off a little on the younger end. Like the Howard stories sort of jumped around, but if you put them in the chronological order, mine's kind of near God in the Bowl. Oh. So he's in his earlier kind of time. He's a little more impetuous, a little less patient, and eager to explore. And I think that's a really fun era because he's just confident enough to get himself in a hellish amount of trouble and very capable of fighting his way out of it. And I think it exemplifies some of those qualities we want to have about the explorer kind of stuff, and about him being willing to put himself into the unknown a little more rapidly than he would if he had more experience.
Very cool. It's funny, before we started recording, I was scanning around cable, and they had the Jason Momoa Conan movie on.
Oh, man.
I still haven't seen it, and I don't know. I mean, how much you've watched all the various. How many really, other than Schwarzenegger, Conans have there been?
Well, so it's just. I mean, there is just kind of the Conan. There's the animation and the kind of stuff.
Oh,
it's interesting because the Arnold movie is so indelible, to most people's vision of the characters, and yet. It doesn't hew really closely to the book canon. It takes pieces of Kull the Conqueror, and Conan as an escaped slave is a Kull the Conqueror thing, and Conan as this sort of and this is no offense. I think it's a great movie, but it's a weird film for, I know, a lot of the Robert E. Howard purists, because there's this sense of, and I think part of it is because of Arnold's, early in his acting career, and he doesn't have necessarily the deep dramatic chops, right? And so they don't rely on dialogue. He's very much this sort of simple, focused fighter, which works really well in the film, and I think they play to those strengths. But it did indelibly kind of change people's perception of the barbarian, and people make a lot of assumptions about a slow-witted character or a very simple character.
Sure.
And Conan in the books is much more witty. He's much more, I don't want to say conniving, because I don't think that's the right term for it. He's a survivor, and he's very strategic and capable, even at a younger age. And that's stuff that comes through in the books, and in some ways comes through in the Roy Thomas comic stuff, but not as much in the movie. But the movie casts such a long shadow over, kind of everyone's perception of the character, that it's a weird thing where you want to lean into certain aspects of it, but you don't want to take away from what's originally there in the source material. So it's neat. I'm trying to show, I did a 3-part Savage Sword of Conan story last summer called Conan the Gambler, and he's very quiet in a lot of the story because he's in this gambling hall, and he's not a gambler, and he doesn't belong there. So he's sizing everyone up. So we get that kind of stoic silence, but it's with purpose in the story. So I'm trying to have it both ways, I
Very
want
cool.
people to be able to recognize the traits that feel true to them with someone like Arnold, but I'm also trying to be true to kind of the Howard vision of the character as much as I can. Because at the end of the day, that's the most important thing to me is I'm not Robert E. Howard, I'm not Roy Thomas, but I've still got to be me, but trying to lean in on the traits that really stand out for me about the character and work so well, set against that classic kind of structure and theme of, barbarism versus civilization. And
totally.
Yeah, the way that Howard would play off the most civilized races and places in the Hyborian Age are some of the most corrupt and depraved and awful. And the very simple, focused kind of nature of the more, barbaric races, and that they can be trusted and that they're true because they know who they are,
Cool. That's excellent. Yeah. Who's drawing the book?
So Raja Antonio is drawing the book. He just did that really crazy Conan 2099 book that they just did. It's a one-shot, and he really, I think, went over well with readers and with editorial. His stuff has a bit, there's some connective tissue to what Mahmoud Asrar has been doing in the flagship book. And so I think visually, if you're just a monthly reader of the Conan book, you're going to notice we're doing a different story and that this isn't Jason's run, but I think it's very compatible across the board. But he's not aping Mahmoud's stuff. It's just very much kind of that style, and I think it works really well with the pulp and the fantasy, and we're doing some really fun stuff on that front as well. So
very cool, man. Well, and as you say, I think your Dungeons and Dragons background, I think, makes you a good fit, and clearly you're a fan of Conan and everything. So that's cool. I was telling you off the air. I started to tell you. I wanted to save it for the podcast. I'm a Howard fan. My favorite character is Howard's, and it's sad because of the time period. There are a lot of racial tinges to it that don't play very well. Mm-hmm. But I just love the idea of Sailor Costigan, the merchant marine boxer. And
man, that is an obscure one for most people, right?
Yeah.
Particularly the comic fans, because they haven't really done much with that character,
no,
right? So.
Not really. And again, I think they're...
I thought you were going to say Solomon Kane for a second.
Oh, well, sure. And I do. And I really like Solomon Kane as well. And I find them really interesting. And that's why I really do think at its basic level and stuff, Howard really had interesting ideas. But no, Sailor Costigan, I'm a huge foreign intrigue guy. Right. And especially as it was explored in the arts during the 30s. Mm-hmm. And I just love, that Indiana Jones period and everything.
Oh, yeah, totally. So, I think what's so good, the Howard stuff is so evocative. It amazes me how young he was, and he was punching out some of this confident prose that just it summons up such incredible visions when I read it. And even when it feels a little overwrought, I'm so impressed with the way he's interplaying the sentences and the kinds of stuff he's doing. And it's a challenge, man. I'm trying to write, I want to have captions in that, Howard and Roy Thomas kind of way that amps up that atmosphere. What's really fascinating to me is the way that Roy made some very strong choices about things like not having sound effects. You don't hear the clang clang of swords or stab stuff. It's all kind of the action's all in the artwork only, and there's no internal thought balloons. It's all in the captions, but the captions are that third person poetic clashes of steel and splashes of crimson, these incredible evocative phrases, and not just taken from the Howard stories, but Roy would run with it and come up with all kinds of stuff that felt in that milieu, and did such an incredible job with it. And it's a challenge because it's so different from the kind of comic book writing we think of with most modern books, but I think it's so intrinsic to what makes Conan read a certain way, and so I'm trying to put that into my writing, and that's one of the ways that I can make the Conan comic feel different from something like Dungeons and Dragons, which has a bit more of a slam bam kind of action to it, and obviously a lot more magical. Like D&D. Sure. It's funny because D&D is influenced by Conan the Barbarian, but it's also influenced by a horde of other, fantasy materials, all jammed together and filtered through the game system for years and years.
Yep.
And so it's its own thing, and it's usually quite high magic and really fastidious in terms of its detail and world building and things like that. And I always joke that Conan the Barbarian is low fantasy. It's like, it's not about armies or magic items or prophecy or destiny. Even though, yes, Conan is, the king by his own hand, most of it is like, vicious, morally bankrupt people up against things way more powerful than they can imagine, and things they will never understand, and they don't need to. They just need to survive, and that's kind of the cool part about it, is Conan knows what he is, and what he is a survivor. And whatever he's up against, if it's a demon or an ape man or a god, he's just got to get through this and not die. And there's something very, very visceral about that I quite enjoy.
That's excellent. That is, so are you going to employ that third-person narrative then?
Yeah. I just
cool.
did it in the Gambler story for Savage Sword, and that got my feet wet. We did a little bit of in No Road Home when we brought Conan in with the Avengers for that crazy event. And right. the issue that I wrote, like 80% of it was the one where Conan and Scarlet Witch are on that adventure in the Hyborian Age, and it just reads like a Conan issue. Like, sure. If you just picked up that issue, you'd basically be like, this is the Avengers, And that was the most fun to write, because I was like, well, maybe this is my only chance to write Conan like this. And then that ended up sort of becoming a bit of a audition, and I did the Savage Sword. And then that impressed the Conan Properties people and the Marvel editorial gang. So then I got to do this Serpent War thing. And Serpent War is
tell me about Serpent War. Yeah.
It's bonkers. And I'm saying this not to be pithy. It's like Crisis on Infinite Robert E. Howard.
Sure.
Like, it's like Marvel and the Conan Properties people wanted to introduce readers to other Robert E. Howard properties.
Okay.
But, most people aren't going to pick that stuff up stone cold. So they're like, is there a way we could do a crossover that's not going to be egregious and whatever? So I dug back into the canon and read a whole pile of stuff and found a really unique character. I don't know if you've ever read, because there's only 2 complete stories. Do you know a character named James Allison?
No. Talk about it.
James Allison is the trippiest Robert E. Howard character. He might be the earliest meta character in fiction that I know about. He is essentially
when's he from? Yeah.
Robert E. Howard, is an author who lived in rural Texas, in Cross Plains, Texas, in the late 20s, early 30s.
Yep.
And James Allison is a writer living in rural Texas who is dying. He's been injured, and he's dying in a bed, and he has lucid dreams / nightmares of his past lives. And so he talks about these places he's been and experiences he's had through these reincarnation kind of thing that he's gone through different existences. And there's a really famous set of letters that Robert E. Howard sent to, I think, Clark Ashton Smith, talking about that once he started writing Conan, he couldn't stop writing. Like, he was writing it, but it was like Conan needed to get out. Like, it was like he was living these crazy stories that were erupting out of him.
Mm-hmm.
And
was
so
Clark
James
Ashton Smith, was he his editor? Or
No, he's another author of the period. He was doing stuff for Weird Tales. Yeah.
Okay.
And so James Allison is essentially Robert E. Howard.
Sure.
But he's like this exaggerated, guy on his deathbed who's living out this parade of past lives. And I was like, what a trippy concept, first of all. And second of all, well, there you go. That's our connection point, because now if James Allison has existed in the Hyborian Age, and he's existed in ancient Atlantis, and he's existed in Solomon Kane's, England, and Dark Agnes's France, and well, this can now connect them all together in a way that's kind of canon, and we can tell this bigger, more epic story in a way that could really work. And so it was really ambitious and weird and insular, and I put together this pitch and said, look, this is how we can do this stuff. Marvel wanted us to bring in some Marvel elements as well, and because of Set the Snake God, I thought, the one character I could see that would actually fit the pulp kind of stuff and the mythic kind of stuff. So Moon Knight is in the mix.
Oh, wow. I was expecting Kazar, but okay.
No, he's because Moon Knight has, with Khonshu, who has fought Set.
Sure.
Set is one god across all realities, and so they're fighting the god Set, and there's a bunch of surprises and weird twists and turns. And it's been an absolute blast to put it together. It was like a breakneck pace, but in some ways that I think weirdly helped the process because I put together the package. Everyone kind of said go, and then I just obsessed over it for I wrote the whole miniseries in I think 7 weeks. Just because I was on a roll and I knew what the next part was going to be and I had to get it out on the paper. And trying to erupt that purple prose and just make it as pulpy and over the top as possible. And the Conan Properties people they freaked out. They responded very, very highly.
Oh, great.
And I didn't know that Jason was going to be wrapping up his run on Barbarian and leaving the monthly title. And so it just worked out. The timing was so good. I just sent in the first issue of Serpent War. And then Mark Basso, who's the Conan editor, said, hey, you're their first choice. Do you want to take over the flagship book?
That's great.
Yeah. I mean, it just made my year.
Yeah.
It actually scared me. They asked me and I didn't say no, but I hesitated in the sense of you always talk about having projects that are bucket list projects. If I had my druthers, I'd write, whatever, Spider-Man or something.
Sure.
And then someone actually gives it to you. And you got to put, your money where your mouth is. You're literally oh man! And of course you do it, and you say, "Yes, this is what I've always wanted." But there was that one quiver of, "Oh boy, you really did it now," And so I hesitated in the sense of well, I got to finish Serpent War, and then I'll take it over, but. When do you need the story pitch? And they're like, oh, as soon as possible. And I'm like, okay, let me just pour this out on the page. I got to get Serpent War done with as much, enthusiasm and intensity. Sure. And the good thing is that got me into this sort of Howard brain, and I was sort of ready to rumble. And I just poured out a bunch of crazy ideas for the future. And it's been a really fun time to be able to obsess over some of my favorite stuff and have people respond well to it. And I never want to take that for granted,
Well, let's get into Serpent War a little bit more, and because I'll be honest, beyond Solomon Kane and Sailor Costigan, I am kind of shallow in my depth of Howard interest or awareness, I suppose.
Well,
so
we built the thing so that anyone can pick it up and not have to worry about knowing the backstory of the characters.
Sure,
Solomon Kane's great because he's this Puritan monster hunter,
Yes.
And he's extremely intense in his faith and absolutely certain in his righteousness. And he's gonna, put the cross on the boots to all kinds of devils and monsters and animal men and crazy crap. And he's a ton of fun to write because I love those kinds of characters. In our lives, we don't get to be certain about things the way he is. He knows exactly what he's doing, and he's so certain of it. And honestly, the most fun I've had, I think, writing Serpent War was writing him and Moon Knight, because Moon Knight is also someone who's affected by his faith, but he's sort of being dragged along by Khonshu and being forced into service to this god. And he has a direct access to his god, and he doesn't like it. And Solomon Kane doesn't have his direct access to, God or Christ or whatever, but he is 100% certain in what he's doing. And so they're a nice kind of polar opposite in this idea of faith. You have this one character who is knows the mission and is going to go get it and can operate completely on faith because he doesn't get any response from his God that he's doing the right thing. And then you have Moon Knight, who's Khonshu is pestering him practically and making him mentally bonkers. And he doesn't like it or know that he wants to keep doing this. So he's kind of dragged along for the ride. And so you've got this Puritan and this pagan, you've got the kind of clashing religions and the clashing purpose. It's a really fun thing the interplay of the two of them is a lot of fun.
And is it Mark Spector, or is it an earlier incarnation?
Yeah. No, it's Mark Spector. So he gets pulled into. He's in the modern Marvel universe, and he ends up finding he travels back to Solomon Kane's time to end up on this adventure. And then you've got this character, Dark Agnes.
Yeah, tell me about Dark Agnes, because that's the one that I
really
don't know much
weird
about.
Character for people who know the comic stuff, because you probably know this. Red Sonja that we read in the comics is not the Howard character.
Right.
Right. So Red Sonja is a character from Howard books, but it's spelled with a Y, not a J, and she's a very different character. And then there's this character, Dark Agnes, who is a Howard character, who is this woman in France who gets put into an arranged marriage and kills her husband-to-be and goes on a rampage and will never stop. Basically, will let no man tell her what she's going to be or how to live her life, and she goes on these intense adventures. I think they're collected in this book, literally called Sword Woman, and she's this intense, really kind of feminist, like freedom fighter, like she's in a real potent personality. And so Roy Thomas took the personality of Dark Agnes and the name of Red Sonja and kind of fused them together to make a Hyborian character called Red Sonja.
Right.
Who started to appear in the Conan the Barbarian comics, became insanely popular.
Yes.
Had her own solo series, and now is actually a separate entity in terms of entertainment and stuff.
Well, yeah, and Dynamite, right? Doesn't Dynamite have Red Sonja?
Yeah, and I've written some Red Sonja
with
them, a one shot, and I did the Conan Red Sonja crossover with Dark Horse and Dynamite. And I think that Red Sonja is an amazing character, but there's something really fun about taking the original Dark Agnes, the primordial source material, and actually bringing her into a story and crossing her over with Conan.
Is she, what time period is she? Is she Joan of Arc era? Is she?
No, she's like, oh God, if I get this wrong, the fans are going to kill me. 16th century.
Okay. Oh, like so isn't Solomon Kane 16th century?
Yeah, so they're about I think about 50 years apart, something like that. They're just a little off askew that they couldn't actually, if one of them went to see the other, I forget which one's older, which one's younger.
Okay.
But literally one of them would be geriatric if it was.
I understand. Okay.
Yeah. But
because that's part of the fun is what eras or what worlds are they from, obviously.
And so she gets pulled to the Hyborian Age in this story.
Okay.
And, she's got like a saber and a flintlock and it's awesome to have her interacting with Conan, and he's Conan, man. He's going to do whatever it takes and get through. And they have these quips and backs and forth while they're trying to take care of this mission. And James Allison's sort of spirit is acting like this conduit, kind of connective tissue, trying to get these four heroes on this disparate kind of quest to stop Set. And it's a real fun, pulpy ride. And 2 issues are out as we record this. The next one is coming out this week as we record it, and then the fourth one end of the month. So they did 2 and 2 in December and then 2 in January.
Oh, okay. So yeah, 4 issue miniseries. All right.
Yeah,
Very
and it was an absolute ride, like just nuts, and we went really, really wild with it. What's fun is that one of the James Allison stories, probably the best one, has been adapted to comics before. In an old issue of a series called Supernatural Thrillers, but the pedigree on it's something else. It's Roy Thomas adapting the story, and Gil Kane drew it.
Wow.
And it is an absolute stunner. It's like one of my favorite Gil Kane stories. And I didn't even – so it's this old story called Valley of the Worm. It's awesome. I love the prose version of it. And then thankfully – as we were working away on the proposal, I was referencing Valley of the Worm like crazy. And Ralph Macchio, the editor, he's been doing some consulting and stuff at Marvel, and he's been helping out with the Conan stuff. He read the proposal, really liked it, which was a huge feather in my cap because I'm a big fan of his editing and stuff from back then.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then he said, there's Marvel did an adaptation of it. It was a one-shot story in Supernatural Thrillers. And I was like, what? I couldn't believe it. And so I convinced Marvel, let's reprint that as part of their True Believers line. And so when Serpent War #1 came out, the same week they had Serpent War #0, essentially, and it's a reprint of Valley of the Worm.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was like a guilty pleasure. Like, I just really wanted to have it back out. And it does honestly help flesh out some of the story stuff. Like, there's some little secrets that we have in Serpent War that if you read the Valley of the Worm story, you'll see how it all connects together in really cool ways. And it's going to be reprinted in the trade as well. So
that's excellent. That was going to be my next question. If they'd collect it all.
Yeah,
that's terrific. That's fantastic.
Just a really cool thing. And I love digging up funky old continuity like that and kind of, roar the engine back to life and check this cool thing out. Isn't that neat,
I was looking at the variant covers for Serpent War, and I like the Neil Adams cover for it, too.
Yeah, the lineup of covers is amazing. Mark and Martin, the two editors on the book, have been so amazing about lining us up with just top-notch talent across the board. The book looks great. There's a new story in the back, just like there is in the main monthly Conan books. There's a new prose story that's serialized over the course of each issue.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a little Solomon Kane story, and it's very cool.
Fun.
You just feel like you got a real complete package there.
And you wrote that as well?
I did not, no.
Oh, okay.
Who's the author on it? I feel bad. Hold on. Now I have to look it up because credit where credit is due. Who wrote that prose story? I'm flipping through the issue right now.
While you're looking, I also noticed that each issue of Serpent War 2 has different interior artists.
Yes. Oh, so the prose story is C.L. Werner.
Okay.
Does a really nice job on it as well.
Excellent.
They did, Vanessa Del Rey does these cool James Allison sort of flashback sequences. We had a wonderful team across the board. Scott Eaton on the first issue just crushes it. Everyone on the team was just absolutely brilliant to work with. We had so much fun, and everyone was really kind of humming along on this top-notch level. It's just been great.
No, the covers look great, and the art's always important in a good Conan story.
Oh, man. And that's the thing. And it was tough, too, because we're pulling together so much reference material, all these different locations and all these different characters. And some of this stuff that, has only been written about. So you're like, okay, we got to design it up or figure it out. And I pull on some older Conan stories. This Conan in this one is also kind of God in the Bull era, to the point where the story in Serpent War takes place literally one day after God in the Bull. Oh. And so Conan's having these snake-filled nightmares of what he just went through in the God in the Bull story. So I was pulling down the Barry Windsor Smith panels and sort of being like, right here, check that out. So it's like, Conan #7, I think, is the story that has that in back in the 70s,
Hilarious. That's cool, man. No, that's great. That sounds great. So 2 issues have already come out of Serpent War in December, and issue 3 coming out this week, the 8th. So that's cool.
And the one of the things I've been trying to do, because I'm taking over the flagship book, you try and beat the drum with the sort of Robert E. Howard faithful. There's fan groups on Facebook and a couple different places where I've been sort of reaching out and saying, hey, I'm going to be on the book. Hope you like it and all that kind of thing. And like I'm always amazed, no matter what the fandom is, whether it's Dungeons and Dragons or the X-Men or anything, there's the hardcore, and there's it's simultaneously like, you want them to be on side, but they're like, convince me. They're like, convince me you're the
well, sure.
And it's fun to sort of to run the gamut and kind of be like, look, man, I'm a big fan of this stuff. I'm doing my research. I've been into this as long as, I can remember. Like, I really want you to give this a shot. And the best feeling is when they kind of go in grudgingly and then come out the other side and they like it. You're like, gotcha, Because I think when they said crossover, they're like, oh, this is going to be a crass, commercialized, horrifying.
Sure.
And then I'm like, you know what? Maybe, just maybe, we did something cool here. Check it out, So,
well, and
it's not that everyone's going to get it. Like some of the people are understandably, they're like, the Robert E. Howard stories are canon and everything else is whatever. And that's totally fine, man. Like, some people are like, hey, there's 3 Star Wars movies, and you're like, that's totally fine too.
Jim, you are like, your superpower has always been, and we've talked about it before, the ability to talk off the ledge, the angry fan, and just kind of hit them with kindness and understanding and be like, yeah, it's all right. I mean, you're very zen about the people that, like, sometimes attack you, and it's like, hey, man, well, okay, sorry you feel that way.
Well,
you just right, you talk them off the ledge. It kills me.
You're like, Robert E. Howard wrote Conan stories for, I want to say, 4 years before he committed suicide.
Okay.
And there were a handful of stories that they found later that were unfinished. Some were complete but didn't sell. Yep. But that's all you got. Those are the number of stories that we have access to. And they're wonderful. And in many ways, they kind of built a genre.
100%. Oh, my God, yes.
It. Like, that's the extent of the canon.
Right.
So we can appreciate them and we can adapt them till our heads fall off. But at some point, if you want this thing to live and to grow, you need to make new stories. And that doesn't mean every single story is going to be as good as, the original, and probably never will be. But let's try stuff out. Some people get really purist. They're like, well, Conan shouldn't cross over with the Marvel Universe. And I say, look, in the core Conan the Barbarian book, I 100% agree with you. There should be a space carved out for the Hyborian Age adventures where he is the pulp sword and sorcery hero, and that's it. I don't want Captain America showing up there. You know what I mean?
Right. Absolutely.
But Savage Avengers, it's crazy, but Jerry makes it work. Like, Jerry Dugan really does really fun stuff with it. When we did No Road Home, it's like it's a fun surprise, and it's and as long as we can stay true to the character and have fun with it, the Conan 2099, I don't know that I would have done that, but I'm also looking, I go, good for you. Like, damn it, why not? Give it a try. It's a one shot. It's like the what if when Conan goes in the present and becomes.
That's where I was going, man. When I was a kid, I loved that comic. That was a terrific comic, and it was atypical of the series. Sure. That's what made it interesting.
But you also knew it wasn't the new normal.
Right,
and
absolutely.
It wasn't replacing your Conan the Barbarian comics. It's just like
it was a crazy little interlude. Yes.
Yeah. And that amazing, cover, and like it was just a cool thing. And so to me, that's how I feel about it. I'm like, obviously we gotta carve out and protect this core, and that's very important, and it means a lot to me. But beyond that, I want more people to discover this character. So if that means you found him through Savage Avengers and you track back to Conan the Barbarian, then we did our job, If you pick up a Savage Sword omnibus and then you pick up the monthly book, we did our jobs. Like, that's part and parcel of the thing. I think these characters are broader than they're not just one thing. They can, Batman, all these characters, you can't really destroy them. You can push them around and try different things out with them. And again, as long as you've got that flagship series where this is where you're going to get the pure hit, if you will. Sure. And then everything else is funky or experimentation, or let's see where this goes,
Well, I just think, too, the pulp writers, and then even the generation before them, the H.G. Wells and the Verns and people like that, there's something about those older characters that I think lend themselves to wandering into a cave that actually is a portal and transporting them. I mean, Burroughs with John Carter and all that stuff, man.
They were doing all sorts of genre pastiche stuff. They were doing all sorts of mix-ups. And stuff like, I think, James Allison and some of the other Howard stories, they have a weird, they were all being influenced by each other. There's very Lovecraftian kind of creatures that work their way into the stuff because these authors were all reading each other's stuff and they were sending letters to each other. And I think it's a playful kind of, not direct continuity, but like little nods of the hat to each other. Like, check this out. I'll bring this kind of stuff into it.
Sure. No, I agree.
Yeah, and I think that's the fun of it, right? And the same kind of thing, too, for me when I'm writing the monthly series. We're taking Conan to the east. We're calling this sort of big storyline like the March to Kitai. And that's the kind of China by way of Japan, by way of Korea, the east as a big, broad thing in the Hyborian Age.
Okay.
We're going to have Conan interacting with some of that stuff. Most of that has not been kitted out. And I don't just want to do like a poor man's, kung fu or whatever. Like I want it to feel like Conan is an outsider, but that in the same way that the Hyborian Age, Stygia is Egypt, but it's not,
Yes.
And Chimeria and all those areas are, it's European / Germanic / Vikings, all these things. It is bits and pieces all sort of mashed together into these regions. I think the East needs to surprise us. We need to have things that are within the scope of those kinds of mythic structures, but we're going to push them in unexpected ways, or add a bit of that Lovecraftian kind of creepy elder stuff, and keep people on their toes. And I think that's the way to keep the readership engaged and excited about, well, what's going to happen next, even as Conan stays relatively the same as he has always been with, his goals and his attitude.
I'm really glad Marvel's getting back to this stuff, and I'm glad that they made the deal to get the license back.
I was so surprised. Yeah, when Tom Brevoort first told Mark Waid and I, we were out for dinner, I want to say Chicago, like C2E2, 2018. And, we had done No Surrender, and we were talking about the next Avengers event. And Tom was like, secret, Marvel's getting the Conan rights back. And we were both kind of gobsmacked. And then he's like, secret, I want to use Conan in this Avengers story. And my first reaction was, are you nuts? And then I thought, yeah, I could see that. We could do that. Especially if I'm going to get my hands on it. That's all I kind of, I need. I don't want someone else to screw it up. I want to screw it up, so. It was a really cool, kind of exciting thing. The funniest thing about going into that story summit, so for both No Surrender and No Road Home, we went to the Marvel offices in person, and we built those stories in the office. Okay. So we did a story summit, and we sat around a boardroom table, and for like 8 hours, you got the menu cards out, and you're shuffling characters and sticky notes and whiteboard kind of stuff. And this time, No Surrender, I was so nervous because both Al Ewing and Mark Waid are such, Mark's an absolute veteran writer, and then Al was like the new hotness, and now he's exploded. And I felt like the low guy on the totem pole, like I wasn't worthy or whatever, and kind of, cut my teeth on that thing and learned a lot, and we had a ton of fun. And then we come in for No Road Home, and we're all full of energy and in-jokes, and we know each other now. There's a great camaraderie in the group. And I knew we were going to have Conan as a piece, and I was bound and determined to be the guy to write the majority of those sections. And so I kind of came in like I was building a legal case, like I've written all this Conan stuff, and I write more fantasy than all you guys, and I've read the stories, and I know this stuff backwards and forwards. Like I was going to just overwhelm them with the evidence, and then they'd give it to me. And as soon as we start talking about Conan, Al Ewing looks over and have you ever spoken to Al, by the way?
No, not yet. I really want to.
Oh my God.
Go on.
Al has the deepest timbre. His voice is so low. I can't do it justice here. And the British too, which makes it even better. So he just looks and goes, "Oh, I know you like Conan, Jim. So it's yours. I mean, of course." And I just looked at him and I was almost mad because he just gave up without a fight. And then I look over at Mark Waid, and Mark Waid goes, "Conan's fine, but I didn't keep up with the books or anything. So, yeah, man, whatever." And I got mad at them. I was like, "Don't give up. I fucking worked hard. I built this thing to beat you both. That you were going to admit I was the right writer, and you guys just laid over and showed your bellies. I mean, yes, I got exactly what I wanted without a fight, but damn it, So all of a sudden it was mine, and it was a real joy to put together. It was an absolute blast. Yeah, everyone on the team was awesome. So
knowing Mark's work on Khazar, I'm surprised because I would have thought that Conan would be close to his wheelhouse or whatever.
No, it's interesting. I think he likes some of the pulp stuff, but for whatever reason, I don't know that the Robert stuff is his jam.
I love when a group of writers or a duo get together and do things. And I remember when Mark and Rucka did a Punisher, Spider-Man, Daredevil, I think, story.
Oh, crazy!
And Mark was just so excited because Greg basically cracked the code for Mark on writing the Punisher.
Right.
And it just didn't. It never occurred to Mark, whatever. And it was conversations with Greg where he's like, "Oh, now I get him. Okay, that's cool." And it is kind of fun. When, and I don't know if Al and Mark felt that way after,
It was such a fun project because I think we were really compatible. It worked very well. Cool. We're all very fastidious. We're all detail oriented, which when we're doing a weekly book is an absolute must.
Yeah,
otherwise,
Jesus Christ.
But we were like passionate about what we liked, but not precious. Like if something needed to change because it worked better for the story, or if I knew this character better, so let me rewrite that chunk of dialogue. No one got their nose bent out of shape, which was really important.
Sure.
And then we had funny things like Mark doesn't particularly like writing big fight scenes, and I love like kind of orchestrating these monstrous battles. And Mark's just like, oh, thank God you can do all that. You know what I mean? And Al has always got these like both aspirational and cosmic kind of crazy crap that he loves to do that I think is amazing. And he does such a good job with it. And there was tons of that for us to heap on him. So we kind of filled in each other's gaps really well. And, you know, being at the table with Mark Waid and Tom Brevoort is essentially like having the official handbook of the Marvel Universe at your disposal. Like it's almost disgusting how much information they have. And it can be infuriating at times because you think you've come up with something cool and then they tell you the 10 times that's already happened. And like, God damn it, you know. But admittedly, if you do come up with something they haven't seen before, they know that will instantly go, huh. And they get this kind of fascinated look on their face like, you stumped me, you know, which is kind of amazing.
That is cool. Well, you know,
I think sometimes the assistant editors too, like Alana Smith, she's a full editor now, but at the time she was an assistant on these books, she's madly trying to take notes as we're just jamming crazy ideas at the table. And Tom will go off in the weeds talking about an issue of Thor that we could reference and who the inker was and what was on the cover. And like, it's so, and Mark's just knowingly nodding and then telling him, you know, oh yeah. And then 2 issues later, this thing happened. Like it was just, you could just leave them and they would just talk all night if you let them, you know.
Well, they're like master chess players.
It was amazing and sickening. You're just like, man, I thought I knew some shit. And you guys are just like, well, you know everything.
I'm sure you remember back in the convention days. I don't know how often you would come down here before you turn pro, or even now as a pro. Mm-hmm. But those times that they would have trivia contests, beat Mark Waid.
Right.
And it's just encyclopedic of both the DC and Marvel universes. It's
glorious and
100%, man, Jesus.
Yeah, Al's a big continuity wank for the Hulk and stuff too, right? So we're all really obsessive compulsive about our own little areas, and it works really well. I find, there were some little bits I think the hardest thing for us was trying to narrow the cast down for those books, because there's so many cool characters.
Sure.
And you're like, we're going to need twice the page count to give anyone, space. And so you're trying to be as judicious as possible, and you're fighting for your favorites. And, those are almost joyful in the arguments that sprout up as you're trying to figure out who should be doing what,
So after 2 weeklies like that, would you want to do it again? Or is it like, all right, that's enough? I mean, how do you feel about the format?
I really enjoyed it. What was smart about it was Tom knew we needed to have a huge lead time. Like if we didn't build this thing out, the art was going to suffer and the final product was going to suffer. So No Surrender, we had almost a year built ahead of time.
Okay.
And for No Road Home, I think we had 8 months. And so it was the kind of thing where we were on a schedule where we were delivering a script every 2 weeks. And there were 3 different art teams that were working simultaneously. But what's crazy about that is they're working on like issue 1, issue 4, and issue 8 or whatever. And so if on No Surrender, Paco Medina is drawing a location that will show up in issue 2, but he's the first one to draw it in issue 9. That's now the reference that everyone's going to use for the earlier issues because that got drawn first, even though it happens later, bonkers stuff like that. Or don't forget to injure this character, even though we haven't drawn the injury happening yet, just weird stuff like that. So we all had to be really on point on those kinds of things to make sure that it all fit really well together,
Commercially, did it work?
It did. No Surrender did really well. I think No Road Home did well, too. The reason why they happened was because there were 2 Avengers movies coming out in 2 years. And so Avengers as a brand had just more bandwidth.
True.
I think people just assumed we were going to do one every year. But the plan was to do one. And then when it did well, they were like, hey, let's do a second one. And that was always kind of the plan. I think we've sort of they did that X-Men one that was sort of a similar format that I want to say Disassembled or something that was a similar kind of approach. And I don't know that it grabbed I think it did okay. So I don't know that there's a ton of, I don't know if retailers would choke us, but like I think the fans really enjoyed it, and you get such an incredible burst of momentum in terms of the storytelling. That's what was really enjoyable for me, was you don't have to worry about do people remember what happened in the story, because it's the momentum week by week by week. Everyone remembers last week's cliffhanger. Everyone remembers where we're going, and there's something really it's certainly fine for someone's ego to have a book on the stands every single week.
Oh, I'm sure.
And
Absolutely,
it feels good to know that you're building out this epic, what would have normally been over a year's worth of story on a monthly book, we put out in 3 months or whatever, 3.5 months. Like, it feels so cool to have that big chunk of material and to have people on board. It was a real joy to put together. Like, stressful, obviously, but once you've got it in the rearview mirror, you have to essentially have them all done months before even the first issue ships. Mm-hmm. So, for example, I know exactly where I was. The week after New York Comic Con 2017, we were writing the epilogue issue because we were supposed to originally have it due on New York Comic Con, and then Tom was like, yeah, that's mental. You guys have hit all your other deadlines. We've got a buffer, take some extra time. But the book didn't start shipping until January, so that's, early to mid-October. You still got November, December, while, issues are getting proofed and lettered and colored out the door. But it's in the rearview mirror at that point. So when people are theorizing and they're saying, oh, I bet I know where this is going to go, like, right or wrong, it's done. It's going to be what it's going to be. And that was kind of the exciting part, was people telling us they were dead certain what they thought was going to happen, and we knew it wasn't. And I can just smile and be like, well, in 7 weeks or whatever, you're going to find out. That was really cool. There was something really joyous. It was like a cool victory lap to have them all coming out in a way that monthly comics, you don't get that kind of feeling.
Sure.
It was awesome. It was a really, really milestone kind of experience for me.
Very cool. So do you want to talk about currently what you're doing with Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah, man. My God. D&D is the greatest. I don't know if you've noticed. I don't know if it's sort of rippled up to your level. D&D is bigger than it's ever been.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Boy, I'll tell you, man, I'm so out of touch. Talk to me. I had no idea that.
It is wild. So
tabletop gaming is back, I guess.
Yeah, gaming is back and bigger than ever. D&D 5th edition, which launched in 2014, is now the largest edition of Dungeons and Dragons. It's outselling second, third edition. Like, it is blowing up in ways that we never even imagined. And I've talked to the people it sounds so dorky to say this. I've talked to the people at the D&D office about this, but we've talked about it extensively. We've really discussed this. It's a constant talking point. Why now?
Yeah,
what is it about the game, and what is it about everything culturally that has brought this zeitgeist to the fore? And I think it's a series of things that you could not have reproduced or planned for, but they've all synergized off of each other. So first and foremost, I think you have a general resurgence of fantasy in pop culture, right?
Sure, Warcraft and
everything from World of Warcraft to Harry Potter to the Lord of the Rings movies to Game of Thrones.
True.
Right up to The Witcher and everything else. Like, I think as a general rule, fantasy is in a very good space, right?
Right.
Then on top of that, you also have a deep well of nostalgia for D&D that has bubbled up in terms of the people that really hardcore played it in the 80s are now old enough to have children that are old enough to play. So they're bringing their kids into it and also reattaching their own nostalgia with it. Then on top of that, 5th edition D&D for a crunchy rules, I'm not going to go into detail, but is a very elegantly presented and simple game to get into. I think it's better organized and better presented than in the past. Not that those were inferior versions of the game, but part of it is presentation and part of it is organization. And the older editions of D&D were a little bit worried about they wanted you to have a horrendous amount of options at your disposal, or dice systems that were very much Well, why do we do it this way? Because we've always done it this way, even though it's not necessarily easy to teach other people. And the barrier to entry was almost a point of pride. I don't think, obviously, like
I know what you mean.
Yeah, like you've got to really commit yourself to understanding D&D.
Right, our secret club. You need to understand. You understand the bylaws to get into the secret club.
And that's a big part of it too, though. So YouTube and Twitch, so those are like the streaming platforms, have blown out all the barriers to entry. So it used to be, like in my day and your day, I don't know if you've ever played D&D.
Oh, no, I did, but you needed like a godfather to kind of
show you, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
The joke of
the basics,
the guy in the basement, going to teach you D&D or whatever.
Right, I got my graph paper. Help me out. What do I need?
Even if someone handed you the book, it was not intuitive how this worked.
No,
but
absolutely
now,
not.
if you watch a YouTube video of a group playing, you can learn at your own pace. You can understand what's happening. You can see, A, people are having a friggin' blast. B, this is really simple. Oh, sometimes they make mistakes and it doesn't matter because this isn't like baseball or some high-end tournament where everything has to be very precise or whatever. And on top of that, you can very easily see yourself in that space. And so the video and the streaming groups have become a way to demystify and to codify, here's how the game works. It's really easy. Have a ton of fun, and you, quote, win Dungeons & Dragons. But on top of that, man, I want to do this. I want to get a group together. I want to hang out with my friends. Plus, you have the digital age, both in terms of YouTube and things like Skype or Google Hangout. People can play with their long-lost friends who are now miles apart.
Yep.
We've got Skype video. We're rolling dice. So you've got the connectivity of the internet and the demystification of the rules, a really great rule set, nostalgia, fantasy is in sort of, ascension. And then you have a bunch of kind of pop culture nerd cool people saying that this game is super fun. So guys like Joe Manganiello or Colbert did a segment on D&D. You've got
didn't Posehn used to do a podcast called Nerd Poker where they were playing D&D?
I think so. Yeah, you've got a bunch of people in some of the decision makers in Los Angeles, producers and directors and stuff, have basically said it's like improv. It's a great way to do story development and break the ice with your friends and stuff like that.
Sure.
And so Vin Diesel famously has run D&D sessions for casts of people he's been on.
That's hilarious. I had no idea that Vin Diesel's in
So
D&D.
stuff like that is
fantastic.
That has become this weird badge of cool happening all at the same time, right? One of the biggest D&D groups online is a group called Critical Role. They're a group of voice actors in Los Angeles. So when you watch their videos, man, the voices are great. The characters are really enriching and fun.
Oh, do they play their characters?
They play their characters, right? Those voices are wonderful. They're really acting it out. The audience for this thing is huge. Like, I'm not joking when I say hundreds of thousands of people watch their game every week.
Amazing.
So imagine those people, if they don't know D&D, are now motivated to discover more about it. And if they do know D&D, man, every week the button's getting pushed like, you got to get back on board. You got to try this thing out.
That's hilarious. Did you notice, I'm sorry, finish your thought.
No, it's a stunning time for D&D as a whole. And being, the funniest thing is that we're talking 2013, before 5th edition launched, I was doing the Samurai Jack series at IDW.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And Ted Adams said to me, man, I really love this book. It's one of my favorite things we're publishing. What else do you want to do at IDW? And I said, there's 2 potential books I would love to do at IDW. I said, I'd love to do Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or Dungeons & Dragons. And he goes, well, Kevin Eastman's coming back, and no offense, he's kind of got priority. And I was like, hey, man, no problem. That's totally cool. And he goes, but D&D, really? And he was genuinely kind of surprised because at that point, the game was in a really low visibility space. And on top of that, and I don't mind saying this, I've said it in other interviews, Wizards was kind of infamous for being a very nitpicky licensor. They want it to be, specific to the thing. Yep. And I said to him, and he told me this, he's like, they're very hard to work with, and it's not really a sales thing right now. And I said, look, they're making a new edition of the game, because of course I keep up with this crap. This is your chance to try again. And then on top of that, these are my people, and I think I speak their language. Let me try. Like, let me just see if there's some synergy there. So he set up a call, and we did a conference call and hashed it all out. And I wrote the first miniseries in 2014, and it went over well. And I've been writing a comic, basically a miniseries almost every year ever since. So it's been an absolute thrill. And through that, what's funny is both the editors I've had at IDW have been amazing, but they're not D&D players, which is actually a plus, because if I can tell a good fantasy story that works without you needing to know the canon,
right,
then I'm
doing. Understand, sure.
What is this character's motivation? What is the point? Then rather than me being up my own ass. But on top of that, what that did beneficially is it got me so that I was interfacing directly with Wizards of the Coast people, because they knew. At a certain point, if they knew it was a good story, the only thing they needed to get was licensor approval. So they put me in touch with the D&D people directly. So now I'm nerding out with them constantly and building up trust. And then they're like, man, we got to get you in here doing more stuff.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Hey, so do you go to Gen Con and any of the
I do Gen Con every year. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah, for several years I had a booth I was sharing with Howard Taylor, who's a sci-fi cartoonist, and Tracy Hickman, who created Dragonlance.
Okay, sure.
If you would have told 8-year-old me I would be hanging out with Tracy Hickman, I would have shit a brick.
That's amazing, man.
It's
That's
incredible.
Great.
You know,
I have a good friend that's really into the gaming world.
Yeah.
And he does Gen Con every year.
Gen Con's amazing. Gen Con is like the purest show to me because, no offense, I love comics, obviously.
Oh, sure.
But sometimes you go to a comic book show and I'm like, people are not happy. Like, people are they're either obsessed with getting celebrity photos or they're worried about spending money, and they don't seem to be having fun because the joy in comics is not, sure, you want to meet creators or you want to get artwork, but the reading happens off site, if that makes sense.
Of course.
Gaming happens at the damn show.
Right.
It's a nigh constant. Every moment you're there, you're playing a game, you're demoing a game, you're meeting new people who are into the same shit you're into, and you're like doing it. And so Gen Con feels very pure to me because it doesn't matter if you're like, literally Terry Brooks was a guest of honor, I think 2 years ago at Gen Con. Mm-hmm. He had a line, but not a deep line. You could get in line and get something signed really easy. And that guy's Terry Brooks. But people aren't there because they want to get Sword of Shannara signed. That's like a bonus.
Right.
They're there to play fucking games like crazy. And so literally the lineup to try a game that hasn't come out yet is like stretching down the aisle. And the lineup for Terry Brooks is like, yeah, man, I could do that. You know, so it's like a very different kind of a mindset from what you're used to at a regular convention. It's, you know, one of the mistakes I think that comics has made over the years is they got so obsessed with trying to prove that they were true art and literature that they seem to turn their nose up at kids comics or accessibility, you know, in terms of that generation. Games doesn't really have that problem. Like, there are some games that are, quote, inappropriate for kids, but the percentage of those is so low. You know what I mean? Okay. Like, D&D is a default. Yes, because it's role-playing, people can swear and be inappropriate at the table, but the game isn't built for that. And it doesn't tell you to do that.
Yeah.
You know, you can get drunk playing Monopoly, but it's not necessarily in the book, right? So, but like a comic book, if it has, you know, content that's inappropriate for kids, it's inappropriate for kids across the board, right? Sure. So gaming has got this one, they don't have the generational gap that I feel sometimes we have in comics. You go to a gaming convention and it's kids all the way up. Everyone's playing Magic the Gathering. Everyone's playing D&D. Everyone's playing board games. Gen Con takes it one step further. They have a family day on Sunday. And so they do like a package price, pretty cheap for the tickets to bring the family. And so there is a ton of kids like vibrating with excitement, playing miniatures games and trying out demos and swinging foam swords and stuff.
That's hilarious.
You could not bottle that energy. It is so good.
That's great.
Yeah, it feels pure. Like I said, Gen Con is one of my absolute favorite shows every year.
That's excellent, man. Yeah. No, it's great to hear because, again, I only got my buddy's perspective, and he's, you know, hardcore, like sitting at the tables.
Yeah, man.
And, you know, when he's not sleeping, he's playing. And
one of my buddies, Sean Kirkham, he's one of the guys that helps run Skybound. They got invested in the gaming stuff. A big part of that was him and a couple of the other guys at Skybound are big gamers, and they were convincing Kirkman, like, look, this is a huge growth area and all this kind of stuff. But Sean did almost like a exploratory year where he just went to Gen Con because he wanted to do research. Is this worth, getting a booth next year and like this? So he shows up on a Thursday night. It's a 4-day show. I just finished, first day of the show. I meet up with him for dinner. It's like 7, 8 at night. We finish up dinner and drinks, and he's like, man, I can't wait to start playing. And I said, well, let's go. And he goes, no, when the show opens tomorrow. I said, dude, that's just the exhibit hall. Like, the play areas are 24 hours. And he looks at me. I'm like, oh, buddy. Oh, you poor sweet summer child. And I take him over to the convention center, and it is nuts.
Happening.
Like at 10 o'clock at night, it is absolutely bedlam over there with people playing games and party games and board games and miniatures games and people demoing and playtesting stuff that's not going to be published for 2 years, just at random tables in the hotel lobbies and stuff, right? And his eyes are just like bugged out. He goes into the Magic the Gathering area, and they're like, we're going to be starting what's called a closed pack tournament. You basically have to make a deck on the spot based on cards you purchase that you don't know what you're going to get. You got half an hour to build your deck based on the crap you just randomly got given, and then you enter a tournament and try and win with it. And they're like, we're going to be starting a closed pack tournament at midnight. And he's like, oh, I'm signing up for that. I'm like, okay, I'm going to bed because I got to open a booth tomorrow, And the next morning, he's just like bloodshot-eyed and crazy, and he's like, Gen Con is the greatest.
That's cool. I'm glad Skybound got involved then. That's wonderful. I was going to say, I think it was last week when DC re-released the Watchmen source book, the old Mayfair stuff.
They re-released it?
Yeah. It's amazing. Yeah, and it's in one. It's called The Watchmen Companion.
Holy crap.
I know.
That had a bunch of, because that was before Alan hated them. So there's like a bunch of like canon approved extra information about the world of Watchmen that hadn't been published before.
Exactly, man. And the guy who wrote the stuff does a foreword and kind of explains how everything happened. And I didn't remember that there were 3, is it modules? The layman. Yeah, the layman's trying to make sure.
No, it's all good. It's all good. I'll set you straight.
I didn't remember there were 3. I mean, awesome. And after I saw the covers of them, I'm like,
I might have to track that sucker down. That's so cool. God.
It's great. And then they also threw in addition to all that stuff, the one issue of The Question where Vic has kind of a weird vision and runs into Rorschach.
Oh, that's trippy, man. We used to play the Marvel Superheroes role-playing game, and the name of the system for it, they called it, the nickname for it was Phase Rip, because it was all the different attributes were like FASE stuff. And we love that game to pieces. The thing that made me laugh, though, they would measure all the powers with all the adjectives from the comics. So, incredible was more potent than amazing, which was, fantastic and astonishing and all this crap. And so we would be, my friends and I, we'd sit around. We were really young at this point. We'd always make jokes, and we'd be like, oh, man, I got to go take an incredible dump. I'll be right back. Someone's like, oh, slow down. But the best was at the top of it was people basically were like, there was all the different adjectives, and then they had something called Beyond for the Beyonder because, it was like the ultimate power. So people were like, I am so hungry. How hungry are you? I am beyond hungry. I need dinner. Like, we're such dorks. God, it was so stupid.
Now, I've seen that phase module, I think, with Star Wars. Or no, Star Trek.
No, that was FASA. No. West End Games did the Star Wars game.
Well, I'm thinking, Star Trek.
Actually, Star Trek maybe was FASA? I can't remember.
Maybe it was FASA instead of
the
FASA.
Company. Yeah.
Okay.
Someone will correct us online as soon as they hear this.
Paul Jenkins is working with the Axanar guys that made the fan movie Prelude to Axanar, and they're doing it. And they came to terms with CBS, so they're following the rules and doing their Axanar War movies and stuff. And a lot of that I know was like the original idea for Axanar came from one of those old Trek modules and everything.
Right. This is what's so neat. We're in a a point now where stuff that would have only ever been fan fiction or only ever been people sitting around having beers has become reality, like crossovers. And like I did the Rick and Morty Dungeons and Dragons with.
Yes, I wanted to ask about that.
Pat Rothfuss and Troy Little. And that is a fever dream of bullshit that should never have ever happened. I mean, it's crazy. Like, you know, and when I first got approached about would you be interested in doing this because you've done the D&D stuff, I was like, of course, but it'll never happen. You guys can't possibly get Adult Swim and Hasbro to sign off on this madness. And yet, you know, we pulled it off and people really enjoyed it. And it spawned, like we did a sequel that's still coming out now, the second series that I wrote. And then they did a game product that came out just before Christmas.
Oh, Jesus. That's great.
And what was really nice was both Oni and IDW, because it was a crossover between the two comic companies, told Wizards of the Coast, hey, if you're going to make a game product, you should get, you know, Jim and Troy involved. And we both contributed heavily to the game product. Great. So I got to write a bunch of crazy crap for that. And Troy did all new artwork. And they've been very just supportive across the thing. And that's, I think, another reason why D&D is doing so well. They've been really smart about their licensors. They've been really smart about their brand extension. I know it's a really dry thing to say, but they've been smart. They pick up on what the fans are enjoying, and they're kind of giving them what they want, but more, or in unexpected fashions that I think is really driving a lot of enthusiasm.
Beautiful, man. That's awesome. Hilarious. You're killing me.
Just bizarre. It's such a wild time. I think people are open to these kinds of things in a way that they wouldn't have been in previous generations. I think the corporations are now finally. I think fans have always been open to it because we've been talking about who would win in a fight forever, right?
Sure.
But now I think the corporations are like, wait a minute, there's a buck to be had here.
Well, and again, they're hiring. But again, as opposed to certainly when I grew up in the 70s, there was a lot of throwaway license stuff that just wasn't that interesting. And I hand it to Oni and IDW for getting the right people, and Bongo back in the day and stuff.
Well, yeah, I think that's the thing. If you're going to do it, then you got to, the casting has to be smart. Like, you get people who are going to really put themselves into it. And it was a weird thing where Pat and I, like, Pat put together a mission statement for this kooky miniseries, and the gist of it was, look, most people think that have you ever watched Rick and Morty?
Of course, love Rick and Morty.
So most people think that Rick and Morty is just like edgelord humor and nihilism, and it is, but it's also about a broken family trying to figure out how to live with each other.
Sure.
And most people think that Dungeons and Dragons is like murder hobos killing stuff and getting their treasure and experience points and build up your stats, and it is. But it's also a shared storytelling medium and a way for us to understand each other better. And if we can play the high and the low brow at the same time, if we can do, gory, cartoony violence and swearing and ridiculousness, while also telling you something weirdly true about why we play games, then we're doing it right. And if we can do Rick as the ever sarcastic nihilist bastard, but also show you why one of his greatest flaws is his inability to work well with other people, and role-playing games exemplify all these qualities that he can't wrap his head around, even though he thinks he understands all the rules. That is something kind of weirdly touching, and it works. And we worked really hard on that. And again, I've sort of talked about before about bringing the Robert E. Howard fans, and they say grudgingly it's good. We had people, I think, coming in to hate the Rick and Morty D&D. They were like bound and determined, this is a crass, gross commercial product. We're going to hate this. And then they read it and they're like, "Arr, kind of touched my heart, you bastards," and you're like, yes. And said something true. Or we would get really, anal about the rules systems, and these are real legit first edition characters, and we rolled them up and made sure all the stats and the statistics and the page and verse are correct. And so I know this stuff really deep, dark nerd. I will out nerd you on it, and kind of make it fun at the same time. So
attaboy. That's great, man. Very, very cool. Are there any other books we should talk about before we wrap up?
One of the strangest and amazing projects I had the chance to work on with D&D actually streamed out of meeting them. So I consulted on story development for a book that came out this year, but I did this is the weird thing about working with book publishers. So at Marvel, we're planning 6, 8 months, sometimes a year out.
Sure.
But most other traditional publishers think that's insane because, like, monthly comics is insane. Traditional book publishing, they're planning a year, 2 years minimum.
Sure.
And so I went into the office at D&D and spent 4 days there doing story development in 2017. And the product we worked on came out in October 2019. Right?
Okay.
But while I was there, we were talking, every night we would go out for drinks and dinner, and we would talk about how you got into the game and, your favorite memories playing and stuff. And I explained to them that I was 8 years old when I started playing D&D with my older brother, and it became a bridge for communication between the two of us because Joe was 12 and I was 8, which doesn't sound like very much, but that's half your life.
Oh, yeah.
And a 12-year-old doesn't want anything to do with an 8-year-old.
Of course not.
But we found a shared communication and interest, and it really drove a lot of our camaraderie at that very crucial age. And they loved that. They loved talking about it. So many months later, they contacted me and they said, we've been talking to Random House about a product for 8 to 12-year-olds to introduce them to the precepts of role-playing games. Your name came up because of this heartwarming story. Do you want to consult on it? And after a phone call, I basically said, no, I want to write it. Like, this
Cool.
is full circle for me. I need to kind of tap into that enthusiasm I had and explain why I wouldn't be a writer without D&D and how it's such a great creative toolbox for people. And that has blown out into this line of books that Random House has put out through their imprint 10-speed called The Young Adventurer's Guides to Dungeons & Dragons. And it kept growing in scope. And now we've got 4 books in the lineup. We're talking about potentially doing more. I've got 2 co-writers that I work with because it got bigger and bigger and it started to impede on my other comic writing deadlines. We do, rather than just reusing artwork from the existing products, they do all original artwork for it. So we're also art directing the books, and it's been this really cool side project that's become actually a very important project to me. And I got to tell you, when those books came out, I was so nervous and I was so excited because are the hardcore D&D fans going to just be like, this is a kiddie thing, or this is not, I want like more rules stuff. And this is very much kind of storytelling and aspirational, get you ready for the game table. And instead the community's really embraced them. And I get photos now of kids clutching these books at the gaming table, posing with them, sitting with their family, or parents telling me my kids didn't understand my gaming hobby and now they're a vital part of our weekly game because the books brought them in the door. And that is like, I can't adequately explain to you how proud I am of that and our team. Stacy and Andrew and the art team at Jetpack 7 and everyone that worked on it put their all into these books, and to have the response we've had. They're being translated into multiple languages. The D&D crew kind of treats them like part of their core line and is helping promote them. And it's just been amazing because it's like if these books can inspire hundreds, maybe even thousands of new people to pick up the hobby, to get creative and to tell their own stories, that is one of the coolest things I will ever be a part of,
I hear you, man. No, that's amazing. That's fantastic. And yeah, like you said, you're inspiring the next generation to start telling their own stories, and who knows what that could lead to.
Yeah, and we never wrote, in the same way like when Stan Lee wrote Marvel Comics, he would use vocabulary that you wouldn't necessarily associate with that age group that we would think of as a Marvel reader in the 60s. I tried to write these books, we're not trying to be obtuse, but equally I'll use the words that I think are appropriate to describe this stuff. And if that means a kid's got to go look something up on the dictionary, great. Like, I'll expand your vocabulary.
Yes. Yes.
And so we had even adult players will gift it to other adults and say, look, you can read this thing really fast because it's like large type and it's 100 pages and it's smaller than a regular book, but you will get why D&D functions just by reading this quick little book. And then I can bring you to the table. So even though it is ostensibly, quote, a young adventurer's guide, we've had, college-age kids and adults who have picked up the books and said, yeah, I bought this as a gift, and then I read it, and then I went back and bought another copy. And I'm like, yes. Like, that speaks to me that we're doing it right, So
are they character studies? Are they how to play the game? How would you describe?
So imagine if I told you, like, the ingredients, like it's like a cookbook without the rules of D&D. So what it says is, for example, this is the introduction of what's called Warriors and Weapons, which is sort of like one of the basic books. It says, This is a fantasy story. You are the main character. Who are you and what do you do? This book is a way to answer those two important questions. It's a guide to the fascinating races that populate the world of Dungeons & Dragons and the combat-centered classes they use to become adventurers. It will give you a wide range of options to choose from, along with the weapons and armor to outfit your heroic persona. You can read this book from start to finish, or open it up at any spot, get pulled in by exciting illustrations, and start brainstorming from there. The more you read, the more character ideas will spring from your imagination.
Oh, that's great. That's terrific.
So it's almost like a little handbook that tells you could be an elf, you could be a dwarf, you could be a gnome, you could be, these things.
What do you want to do?
And then it tells you some of the iconic qualities of those races. Same thing with character classes. Fighter, ranger, rogue, all these things. And what we did is a lot of call and response. So we'll have questions and answers. So it'll say something like, have you always wanted to explore, hidden places? Do you want to do these kinds of things? Do you like the idea of sneaking around? Maybe you would be a good rogue, like stuff like that. And so a kid can read that and go, yeah, that sounds really exciting to me. I want to be that.
Sure.
The reality,
it opens their imagination.
A parent
Absolutely.
or a peer is going to tell them, roll this die. Here's what it means at the table. What I need you to have as a new player is excitement and ideas, that you come to me and you say, I want to be a sneaky rogue, and my character's a treasure hunter, and they're obsessed with getting gemstones. And I'm like, cool, let's tell a fun story together. I'll tell you what these stats mean, and I'll tell you when to roll the dice and how many hit points you have. That's not as important as you being enthusiastic and engaged about a story and a character.
Sure.
And so this is the fiction ingredients. These are the bits so that a kid can say to their parent, I want to be a,
thief.
Tiefling warlock. Okay, cool. What does that mean, and what kind of spells do you cast, and let's have fun. Because at the end of the day, that's what the game's all about,
Sure.
And so
Absolutely.
For us, it was about, giving people cool choices and laying it out in the most straightforward manner. And a lot of those guidebooks, I don't know if you remember, there were whether guides to castles and guides to all these different things. You could flip it open and there would be cross sections of buildings, and there would be, here's what the armor they would wear and here's the architecture. Those were the kinds of books that really grabbed my attention.
Agreed.
And even when I'd look through the old monster manual, I would obsess over the descriptions of the monsters and the illustrations of them. I didn't need to know how many hit dice they had or what kind of saving throws they were. I just wanted to know the beholder can melt your face, that is the coolest thing when I'm 8 years old. And so these books are that distilled down. It's literally here's a cool creature. It's really dangerous for these reasons. Here's where you can find them. And here's some strategies, do's and don'ts. Maybe you shouldn't look the Medusa in the eye, stuff like that.
Very funny.
Yeah.
That's terrific, man. No, that's great. And again, it sounds like the kind of product that would open a kid's imagination.
Well, and they've done really well. They've done well in a bunch of different markets.
Great.
Here in
and you said 4. There's
4 of them. Yeah. So originally it was supposed to be The Young Adventurer's Guide to D&D.
Yes.
And then as the proposal, we started to plan it out. I was like, I need at least 2 books. I said, we need to have a hero book and a monster book. And they were like, cool. And then we kept working on it. I was like, magic is too big. So we need a hero book and a magic book and a monster book. And they're like, yeah, great. And then as we're developing it, I was like, they go, you keep referencing all these specific dungeons, these places. And I was like, yeah. And they go, how about a dungeon book? I'm like, I can do that. So now it's 4 books, and just been so much fun to tear into this material and work with our crew. And Andrew Wheeler and Stacey King, who are co-writing it with me, they come from different kind of experience levels. Like I'm the old school grognard who's been playing since first edition. And I think Stacey started with either second edition or she just played a little bit when she was a kid, but most of her experiences later on. And then Andrew really started with fourth and fifth edition. So we all kind of check each other as well in that same way of, am I getting too much in the weeds or too old school? They're bringing different qualities to it as well in terms of their perception of the game. And we even each other out very well in the process.
Very cool, man.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's amazing, and I appreciate the update
No,
on the health of
D&D here on the Word Balloon podcast.
It's truly fascinating. I mean, if my non-response is anything, it's just because I'm listening to you intently and like, wow, this is really cool. And it's great to hear because everything you said about what I only played D&D a handful of times back in high school, and it was the, like you said, all the point value stuff and just the minutia that kept me from enjoying what I really just wanted, which was, hey, let's just have a fun adventure. Yeah,
I mean, what's amazing about D&D is it can be a very kind of strategic game and a very like a board game with more flexibility, or it can be a very narrative kind of acting thing, and kind of anything in between. And so every group is a little bit different, where your threshold is based on what your group wants or what you feel like from week to week. And so I think it can be really valuable to find the right – most times, and this sounds very idealistic, but I don't think it's that people hate role-playing games. I think they maybe haven't had the right experience that would have brought them in the door.
Sure.
And so that's really the key. If you're a deep strategic kind of strategist sort of thing, you want to have more like a miniatures battle game. There's a version of D&D that works that way, or you can push in that direction. If you just want to gather treasure and add experience points like a video game, you can kind of do that. Or you can very much make this a narrative thing and a political thing or a emotional acting kind of experience. It's that too, right? And what I'll find is that people will say, oh, I don't like D&D because they'll have had a disparate experience, that they wanted to have rolling dice and blowing stuff up, and the people they were with wanted to make it Shakespeare, and they're like, I don't care about your character motivation. I want to murder the monsters, and vice versa.
Sure.
That people who are like, man, I heard we're going to tell these cool stories, and I sit at the table and everyone is like, got the tape measure out, and they're figuring out if the range of their spell will hit or something, And so I think it's just about finding the right mix with the right people and also good communication. Like, here's what we're in for. This is the way I like to do a game. Are you all cool with that?
Understood. It was funny going to Illinois State University back in the 80s. There was a gaming company that was in downtown Normal. Mm-hmm. That's the name of the town, Normal.
The town's called Normal?
Yes.
Wow.
I know. Normal, Illinois. Boy, there's an oxymoron. Absolutely. I remember one of Bush's speechwriters, Bush 43, she wrote a book, and it was 15 minutes from Normal.
Ha.
And because she heard that on the train, and she just it's like, yeah, that's my life right now,
that's
15 minutes from Normal. But anyway, Normal had, I think it was called Games Workshop, but Tim Bradstreet, I know, got started there.
Oh, neat.
Because he and I are the same age, and we were in college. He went to Illinois Wesleyan, which was down the road from Illinois State. And we'd see each other at the comic book stores and stuff. And it's so funny now when we do see each other as older adults and we just shake our heads in terms of, man, you always wanted to be in broadcasting and you did it. And I'm like, yeah, and you always wanted to be like a great fantasy artist and you did it.
What's amazing to me about Bradstreet, the first time I ever saw Bradstreet's art and it made me really sit up and take notice was he did the chapter break art in Vampire the Masquerade, the first edition. And they were so evocative and they were so potent. And they exemplified each of those clans of vampires indelibly in your mind. And it put put White Wolf on the map because their game really sold this mature, cool, badass gothy storytelling. Yeah. And if you'd been playing D&D for years, all of a sudden you were like, I got to do that. That is friggin' awesome. And Bradstreet, his vision of that World of Darkness was so sharp and was so it just. You didn't even need to describe it. You said, this game's going to feel like that. And you're like, I am in. I am down. My angst is ready for that. I'm down. Yeah.
That's hilarious. Well, talking to you makes me think I should reach out to Bradstreet and have him back. It's been a while. I haven't been to Comic-Con the last 2 years, so I'm going to have to and I'm probably going this year.
Are you?
And, of course, he's a San Diego guy, so he'll be there.
I did San Diego, so I did a stretch of like 16 San Diegos back to back.
I understand.
And then I took a 2-year break, and I thought I don't have to go back ever again. I'm done. And,
that's hilarious.
And then I went back this year. I keep saying this year. We're in 2020 now, but I went back 2019. Comixology brought me out because we did a creator-owned launch there. Max Dunbar and I did a book called Stone Star, which was this sort of sci-fi adventure story, very, very fun stuff and really colorful and crazy. And Comixology was just wonderful to work with on that. They were really flexible and they kind of let us run wild. And then they brought us out to the show to promote it. And it was a cool thing because I had just been gone for 2 years and I'm coming back to promote a new project, and it felt kind of new and fresh again. Like I recognized all the bits, and so I knew how to get around, but I didn't have the detritus buildup of like, oh God, here we go again, you know.
Sure.
And I wasn't working a booth, which admittedly is a real plus.
Of course.
And so I really had a great time. I had a real fun time, kind of re-tapped into the enthusiasm of it, you know.
Well, I was the same way, only it was like a 10-year stretch, and I'm like, all right, I'm kind of busy. Maybe I'll take a year off, and then it became 2 years. And then I'm like, okay, I'm cool to come back now, and now I'm looking forward to it.
So you haven't been in 10 years?
No. I went for 10 years.
Okay.
And 2017 was the last one that I went to.
Okay.
So I missed 18 and 19, but I'm coming back this year.
I thought you said you hadn't gone in 10 years. I was like, dude, you will not recognize the place. It is.
Oh, no. And I only started going 14 years ago.
Oh, wow.
2006 was my first.
Nice.
And certainly I can see how much it's changed in the
just unbelievable. 2002, I want to say that was my first year. I want to say that they broke 70,000, and they were the murmur going around was it'll never get bigger than this. Like, and now it's more than double that, right? So.
Yeah, and I mean, early on, then too, more celebrities were just walking around.
Yes.
And they weren't as walled off or protected or wearing the masks.
No, I remember seeing Weird Al digging through long boxes.
There you go.
That
Absolutely.
is friggin' amazing.
Yep. Mark Hamill doing the same. Yep. Samuel L. Jackson walking around when Snakes on a Plane was out. Or I remember the whole Grindhouse cast was in the middle of the floor that year, and it was almost like Hollywood Squares. They had like a little platform set up, a 2-floor platform where you would get autographs or whatever. Right, and it was they were just all there out. And Roxanne Dawson, I talked to her at her table.
It was
it was just you could just walk up.
I remember when preview night was actually preview night. Like people were setting up their booths.
Yes.
Like it was not run for the exclusives. Everyone's going to make a day's worth of money in 3 hours. Like it was very much ease your way into the show. Yep. Oh, let me help you carry that box kind of thing, you know.
No, it's true, and it's a shame it's gotten as big as it has, but it's still fun. And no, I agree with you in terms of depending on what your responsibilities are at the show. You know, it's nice to hang. I always say it's an expensive summer camp.
Oh, yeah, totally. You know, that was the other fascinating thing is I would talk to people because the movie and the pop culture entertainment aspect of it is so much larger. There are people who are literally just there, you know, haunting Hall H and stuff. And they literally are not comic book people. They're not even video game people. They're literally like Hollywood watchers who just want to get in that room and camp out there for the whole weekend. Or people, you know, there's some people who are there like, I'm going to get all the exclusive toys. And that's pretty much their entire MO for the weekend, you know.
Or the people gaming, and they're off in private rooms gaming their asses off. And it's just like walled away from everything else that's going on the main floors.
It's fascinating. Crazy. You know, that's why I appreciate some of the larger conventions that are able to kind of split the difference where they have the celebrity stuff and they have the gaming stuff and they have the video game stuff, but the comics are still, you know, pretty intrinsic to it. Like Emerald City Comic Con is one of my favoriets because it hews that balance really well.
Agreed. Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, and also, it makes you appreciate even the more pure comic book shows as well.
Big time.
But I always say, and I mean this was always from the start, that I'd see anime fans at Comic-Con doing their thing, and they're having a completely different experience.
Absolutely. Cosplay, all that stuff is so... I mean, it is its own industry now.
Yeah, well, it's a mini city. Like, there's just so many other things that you can be doing at the same time. And it always infuriated me when I would hear podcasters who weren't going, and all they caught was whatever the coverage was from USA Today and CNN and all that stuff. And, of course, they're focusing on Hall H, and, Comic-Con isn't Comic-Con anymore.
You're like, man.
It's like bullshit.
Yeah.
No, it is.
Like, I think one of the most amazing things is it can be all these different experiences.
Yes.
You know, the original art dealers, some of the biggest and the best are at Comic-Con. You can dig through that stuff for hours and hours and hours, and inevitably a bunch of those artists are also going to come by and just say hello to their art dealers, and you're going to get to meet all those people. You can.
That's true.
with Art Adams for an hour or whatever. You can hang out and just have these conversations if you want them. It's not one thing, and you can't do it all. You've got to kind of pick your battles.
Well, and another, like in an art thing, and it has nothing to do with comics, but just that one corner that has all the old pulp magazine art and great art from the 40s through the 70s that are men's adventure magazines.
So that's become, not those in particular, but original art has become my wang. Like,
sure.
Because I used to, you'd buy books or you'd buy exclusive books and hardcovers and crap. But at the end of the day, it's like, okay, I can get books pretty easily from most of these publishers. It's not really a thing for me. It's fine. I'll buy some older stuff. I'll buy some. I'm looking to like fill in my first edition D&D collection or whatever. But original art is kind of the thing that's become something really special because it is so unique. At first, I was buying pages from. I tried to buy one page from every project that I was writing.
Okay.
And then more artists are digital than ever before, and so it can get hard.
True.
And then eventually you're like, I've always wanted to have a piece from this artist, or wouldn't it be cool to have an original such and such? And now the collection is getting gross, like in a good way. So we joked around. We always throw a big New Year's party here at my house, and I have tons of original comic art up around the house. And I was like, man, there's so much stuff I need to get framed. I'm kind of running out of room on the walls without it looking tacky. And so I took everything down and I reframed stuff, and I literally changed every piece of art in the house and didn't repeat anything because we have so much original art. So it's probably about 60 pieces up around the house. It's great. Bonkers now. It's great.
That's great.
It's like this nerd gallery. I love it.
Oh, yeah. My living room, I'm looking as we're talking and stuff, I podcast out of my living room, and I have a bunch of commission art on the walls and stuff, and I love it. And I have the same problem that I have 2 times the amount that's on the walls that I haven't framed yet, and that's exactly my intent as well, is to like, okay, and I'm going to rotate.
Yeah,
and it's just, and it's going to be great and fun, and I love it. And I have some original pages, but I really do like getting commission stuff because to me that's almost like a private performance.
Oh, totally. And you're able
to
what I mean? Yeah, totally. So one of the things I had to get, and this is probably going to be one of the peaks of my collection because God knows I can't afford to do this very often. I'm taking over Conan the Barbarian,
right?
And they hired an oil painter to do the covers.
Wow.
So this guy, Eric Gist, E.M. Gist, man, he's super good. And cool. The first cover got solicited, and I saw it, and I was like, oh, God, if he works traditional, I'm doomed. And he does. So I contacted him. He's an oil painter on Masonite, and I was like, all right, tell me the damage. And my wife and I were talking about it, and she goes, look, if you don't buy it, he'll just end up on some lawyer's, wall. It's your birthday and Christmas and everything combined. Just get the damn. You had a crazy
awesome,
year.
Man.
So I bought an oil painting, and it arrived just before Christmas. And so now I have this damn thing, and it's stunning.
Oh, come on, man. That's beautiful. That's wonderful.
So I've got a friggin' Conan now in my office. It's so
beautiful, man.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like, yeah, and I mean, good Lord, if I had the money, I would certainly tell Mark Texeria and Joe Jesko and some of
right?
these guys, hey, paint me this by all means. So I'm content with my pen and ink, Gabe Hardman's and Chris Somney's and Mike Wells,
right?
I got a Tony DeZuniga, Jonah Hex that he did.
Oh, that's awesome.
So yeah,
very cool.
No, it's fun. Yeah, it's fun.
John Byrne was doing a handful of shows.
Yes.
And I went to Boston and I bought a Next Men page.
Oh, great.
And I was like, man, that is going to be like just any John Byrne original is
going to
track down. So,
yeah, and my thing like that is I have a Kurt Swan, Tex Blaisdell Superman page, and it's really a Clark and Lois scene, and they're at the U.S. Capitol. And they're eating, and I know you're Canadian, but there's a tradition at the U.S. Capitol. They serve this white navy bean soup.
What? Okay.
I know. It's just kind of like it's on the menu every day. And back, I think in either the 1800s or early 1900s, one of the either senators or congressmen are like, "Oh, this is so good; it should be on the menu every day. I declare that we should do this," and everybody voted yes.
Wow.
So it's just kind of this like tradition of when you go to the Capitol, if you in the cafeteria, you have the navy blue suit, and that's the same as like Superman or Lois explaining it to Superman or Clark or vice versa. I can't remember, but it's a Kurt Swan page, and I'm like, amazing. Oh my god. So that was my birthday present to myself. I think when I turned 45, I was like, yeah, man, I'm gonna get, oh, damn it, I'm buying a Kurt Swan pig.
Do you know, I don't know if you've ever met, it's weird because you probably haven't. There's this guy named Mark Asquith. He was the manager of the Silver Snail in Toronto back in the 80s.
I definitely know the name, but go on.
And then he became a producer on a television show called, I'm going to get it wrong, Prisoners of Gravity.
Oh, I remember that show.
And it was an interview show that was with sci-fi authors and comic book people.
There were episodes on YouTube.
He interviewed Kirby and stuff, like all kinds of amazing stuff that people hadn't seen on TV before. And it was very much his bliss, like whatever he thought was cool. He got to know everybody in comics, everybody in pop culture. Mark's a dear friend of mine here in Toronto. And he would tell me, oh, you got to come by and see my original art collection. And I would say, yeah, of course, we're going to do this. I'm going to come by and see you. And you put it off, and we meet up at a bar, we meet up at a restaurant, or we meet up at a convention, and I never go to the guy's damn house. So, 2018 Fan Expo, I think it was 2018.
Okay.
He shows up to the convention, comes over to my Artist Alley table with a portfolio. And he's like, God. You didn't bring you wouldn't come see the collection, so I brought some of the collection to you. And he flips it open.
I bet. Oh.
John, he's got 2 pages from Watchmen.
Wow.
He's got Frank Miller originals from Ronin and stuff. He's got, like, the portfolio he brought is probably worth a couple $100,000 worth of original art. He had Mike Kaluta pages in there. He had Charles Vess paintings in there.
Wow.
Just,
oh my God.
Just sitting in a portfolio. And I'm like, what are you doing? Mark, you're an idiot. You're going to get mugged. People are going to kill you.
Well, yeah, Jesus. Yeah, what are you doing?
You're literally folding this stuff out on my Artist Alley table. People are rubbernecking, wondering what the hell's going on. While they're trying to find your license plate number, they're just going to club you and take you out. And Tom King came over because he heard there were Watchmen pages. He wanted to check it out, right? Sure. And I'm like, the Whisper Network has taken hold. You need a bodyguard. Like, this is...
Yeah, really, man.
This is crazy. He's just like, no, it's beautiful. I wanted you to see it. And I'm like, I want to see it, and I'm thrilled to be seeing it. I won't touch it. I'm, like, freaking out because every fingerprint is probably $1,000 I just took off the top.
Oh, my God, absolutely, yeah.
But it was stunning. It was one of the most amazing art collections I've ever seen.
That's and that is the cool thing, and really before everyone got hip to buying this stuff and everything, you used to be able to get it for a song.
Oh, $100 a page kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the high end. I mean, you're right, man. No, and it's a different world now. And again, that's kind of why I'm like, something. I'm going to stick with just getting commissions because that's. It's okay. And again, it's like, it's what I want, do this for me.
Oh, totally.
So yeah, it's cool. No, but I do. I know the original art's just incredible. I stayed with Bendis, in Portland, and he's got all the artist editions that everybody puts out.
Sure.
And yeah, half the time when he's writing and I was sitting in his room and stuff, I'd be reading the artist editions.
Oh, they're phenomenal. And that's one of the things I love about shows like San Diego, where I can go to the show and just flip through the artwork. Whether or not I'm buying anything, if I see an original from one of my favorite artists or a piece I remember really viscerally, and now you get to see the ink work and the little flecks of the everything, man. It's so incredible. I saw years and years ago, I was at San Diego and I saw a Michael Golden Doctor Strange page.
Oh, great.
And I think it was like $12,000. And I was just laughing because I was like, holy, and I'm looking as close as you could possibly look at it and without licking the page. And just like stunned at the care and the fine line work that could never be reproduced. And what's also amazing about that stuff is, what's also not reproduced are things like gestural sketches figuring out a pose before they inked it, So you're like, oh, there's 3 arm positions and that's the one they went with,
Yes.
And you're imagining process and you're seeing this stuff has been made by a person. And I know it's obvious, but reproduction. If you ever see Disney original artwork, you see the refined imagery frame by frame on the movie screen, and it's beautiful and silky smooth and whatever. But when you see those sketches, when you see the very graphite hitting the page, there's something very primal about that I absolutely love.
I hear you, man. Yeah. No, absolutely. I've got a couple process pages of Mike Grell Tarzan stuff.
Oh.
And it's great. Yeah, no, and also a few breakdown pages of Mike Norton stuff.
Breakdowns are great. I love the rough stuff. I bought some Adam Warren originals. Adam's such an amazing guy. He's one of my favorite people. And he's like, he doesn't do a ton of conventions. And I met him through the Udon crew, and we got along really well. And so then it became like a chummy thing of like, well, if Jim's going to be at a show, I'll go. Can you put our tables side by side? And then he was coming to Toronto, and he's like, you live in Toronto, right? Yeah. And he goes, I hate hotels. He's like, can I crash at your place? I'm like, yeah. So he's like, here's what I need. I just need a bed to sleep on and a case of beer. And I'm like, done. And so we just like sat around talking about Hong Kong cinema and Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, that's great.
Get hammered. And he'll just sketch, like crazy. So I got a bunch of Adam Warren just like sketches, or I bought.
That's wonderful.
He did a variant cover for Wayward, and he gave me the thumbnail breakdown rough, the rough pencils, the inks, like every stage of it. And I'm just like,
great.
Oh, it's the best. Like I love seeing that visceral, step by step. Yeah, it's the best.
All right, now you just mentioned Hong Kong movies, and I literally just saw this documentary over the weekend that's on Netflix. And I want to get the title and tell you about it if you have
totally.
Netflix. Okay, what the hell was it called?
There's always new stuff popping up, and I never hear about it unless it like hits your front page of Netflix or whatever.
Totally, man. Let's see. Here it is. It is, and there's a little bit of it. What the hell is it called?
I'm gonna
Iron Fists and Kung Fu Kicks.
Oh, I'm writing that down.
And it's fantastic, and it is like the history of the Shaws and
awesome.
And also Golden Harvest, and it's terrific. It's
so
excellent,
good.
and also the influence it had on blaxploitation films in the 70s.
It's amazing. Some of the earliest stuff I saw there was this weird fan compilation edit of a bunch of Jackie Chan stunt scenes.
Cool.
Done to music video stuff. This is like the early 90s, like maybe 1990. When was Jesus Jones a thing?
94?
No.
Listen, right here, right now, isn't it?
Is that right here? 94? I was thinking.
Hold on. You're probably right, but here, let me. Yeah, that's a good question there, Jesus Jones.
Because then I can nail it right down in terms of the year.
That's hilarious.
1990, bam.
Oh, good for you, buddy, man. Jesus.
So
Jones.
Jesus Jones. So Jesus Jones. So that song, Unbelievable, literally someone edited a bunch of Jackie Chan stuff to it as like a fan compilation, and I was just watching with my jaw agape, like, what is this human being doing? Like, incredible stunts and flips and near death, kind of stuff, and that kind of brought me in. Like from there, I was absolutely hooked. And
wasn't In Excess unbelievable, by the way? Maybe not.
No, EMF. Oh shit.
Oh, okay. Because Jesus Jones is right here, right now, of course. But that's cool.
Yeah,
that's cool.
It was that stuff just brought me right into it, freaked me out. And so I started watching the Jackie Chan stuff, and then you track to the Shaw Brothers and all the things. You start watching everything and appreciating the kind of guerrilla filmmaking attitude of just like, well, we got some cardboard boxes. Why don't you jump off a third floor landing?
Yes. Well, and similarly, a buddy of mine had a great VCR compilation of movie scenes and stuff, and just had a greatest Bruce Lee hits thing.
That's awesome.
Of course, again, growing up in the 70s and stuff, very aware of the Bruce Lee, midnight shows and 24 hours of Bruce Lee movies at various movie theaters and stuff in the summertime. Good stuff, man.
There was Toronto used to have, I think it was called Kung Fu Fridays. They would have once a month at one of the little sort of short run theaters, and so check out some of those crazy things. It was good fun.
You'll love this documentary because they talk about that, and they talk about the success of these. Got it on in New York on 42nd Street next to the Triple X theaters. It was like the Triple X theaters And all the kung fu movies and the blaxploitation movies all on the same block.
So awesome.
Very interesting. Yeah. Cool stuff.
Awesome.
Well, Jim, as always, man, hilarious conversation.
It was great. We covered some crazy ground.
As I expected, and I always anticipate that kind of conversation with you, and it's great to hear that you're getting to scratch off a couple of things from the bucket list with the Conan stuff.
Yeah.
That's wonderful, man.
The Hyborian Age. I again, just like literally having D&D and Conan in my left and right hand at the same time, like two of the biggest brands in fantasy. And my mantra is literally just like, well, don't fuck that up. Oh, my God. Well, very, very excited, very determined to make the most of these and enjoy the process. I think it's really easy to – it sounds weird. If you haven't done this stuff before, if some creative or comic book people or writers or whoever are listening to it, that feeling of I finally got one of these things I wanted, and then that tense in your gut like, oh boy, but enjoy it because you don't get these kinds of opportunities very often, and it's really easy to get caught up in the stress of it. But I'm trying to really enjoy the ride, even while I'm putting myself under a proper amount of self-criticism to try and hit the high marks with it. So,
well, congratulations, man, and as always, best of luck. And Conan 13 coming your way.
Conan number 13 in February.
And also in the meantime, the Serpent War happening now, and 2 issues out in December, and issue 3 coming out this week, and then issue 4 to wrap things up. One
of those things that I do because I'm a big old dorko. I always have to check the legacy numbering, so I really like legacy numbering on all the books.
Sure.
So like when I did the Savage Sword issues, I knew that I was doing Savage Sword like 7, 8, 9, but in my head it's like it's 242, 243, 244. So Conan the Barbarian, my first issue is number 13, which is number 288. So if I get to do 13 issues, I will do Conan 300, and so I'm trying not to jinx that. But
cool.
Yeah, that would be an absolute mother of God. That would be incredible. So,
attaboy.
Yeah.
Excellent, man. Well, always a pleasure. Well done.
Rock and roll. Thank you very much.
Jim Zub, Serpent War, 3 issues of it are already out by Marvel. And also look for his takeover of Conan, the regular Conan book with issue 13. Sounds like he knows what he's doing. I'm very excited about some of the plans he has for Conan and the Robert Howard universe, on which he's been a big part of already with Serpent War. But also looking forward to more Dungeons and Dragon books from Jim Zub. Hope you enjoyed today's Word Balloon, all brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners with your support via Patreon. Patreon.com/wordballoon if you want to help subscribe. Is Word Balloon worth $1 a month to you? Is it worth the price of a comic book a month to you? I hope so. I try to give you great entertainment every month. And January's no exception. We've got a great slate of guests coming up for January. Thank you, as always, League of Word Balloon listeners. Word Balloon also brought to you by Aftershock Comics. They are shaking things up now at your local shop. Great new upcoming titles. Things like God Killers by Mark Sable, and Zach Thompson's Undone by Blood, and John Layman's The Man Who Effed Up Time. Looking forward to talking to these men and other Aftershock creators about their books. Marguerite Bennett with Animosity, and Raphael De La Tour, her artist. Baby Teeth, Donnie Cates and Gary Brown, A Walk Through Hell. Garth Ennis, Gordon Suzuka, among the all-star Aftershock books. There's Dark Red from Tim Seeley. There's Dark Ark and Night Temporal from Cullen Bunn. So many other great titles from Aftershock in the worlds of horror, science fiction. Great ideas, great concepts, great genre-bending concepts that deserve your attention. Go to their website. You'll find full story descriptions, art preview pages, and the way to get these books through the Diamond Codes and order them through your local shop at AftershockComics.com. Thanks again for listening to today's Word Balloon. We got more great stuff coming for the month of January. If you didn't already notice, I have another episode that dropped today with New York critic Matt Singer. We talk about a lot of movies and television, not only from 2019, but a look at what's coming up in 2020. Great conversation. I hope you'll join us to hear it on Word Balloon. Until next time, thanks for listening. Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions, copyright 2020.